Hello, friends. This is Dr. Apoorv Mehra, and I have a privilege to share the stage with my teacher and my mentor, Professor Sudhir Kumar. And sir, non-union fracture neck femur. I am fortunate I've been trained under your hands, and this was my long case in DNB, and I happened to clear my DNB after my MS. And I just want you to tell the summary of non-union fracture neck femur, the salient feature that a candidate will have to speak and will have to see, the main points that you want to summarize.
Okay. So is if non-union of fractured neck or femur commonly you come across either in an elderly age group which has not been treated, they have remained as a what we call as untreated or neglected cases, or at times in younger people who have been treated but the fracture has not united. So these are two major scenarios. It's rarely to see a fracture non-union of a neck of a femur in a child. So most of the time that you get a patient of non-union of femur is either an adult who has been already treated and fracture is not united, and patients who have been left untreated in elderly age group. They have one or the other neglect at either end. So these typically the patient presents to you with a history of injury, and at times in elderly age group they say that they just slipped off, but they felt some pain, but they still kept walking. They didn't bother much, they still kept walking with or without support. And maybe in 3 to 4 weeks' time, they land up in a hospital where they are diagnosed as fractured neck of femur. Maybe it was an impacted fractured neck of femur to start with. So it is important for a candidate, a student who is appearing in the examination, to take a profile of the patient and then go into the chronological presentation. And it's important that he should be able to highlight what was the pre-fracture status in elderly people, because that is an important parameter that's going to decide on to the type of treatment that they are going to be given, and you are expecting what kind of rehabilitation on those patients. While in adults, you got to know about what kind of treatment the patient has taken and what is the disability that he is suffering from. To further add on to it, it is also important that which background the patient comes from in adults. Whether he is coming from a setup where he needs to do all floor activities, or he is coming from a setup where he is a executive. So it's important to know what is his occupation and what is he looking for finally. Hence it's important, these are important points in the history, and then to determine what is the associated morbidity in these patients. So a patient suffering from diabetes or hypertension or any past tubercular disease, so any associated features, and also to know whether in certain people you may come across a pathological fracture.
Right.
So you got to know, was the patient having any pain before the injury,
Right.
or before falling down. So a wholesome approach on such a patient where he's unable to walk on that limb, bear weight on that limb, is presented to you in the examination. So that approach, keeping with that approach in mind, with that kind of a background of a history, which is important, you should proceed for further examination of the patient.
So now whatever sir has said, I'll be stretching into the presentation and explaining you each point about it. Age, young adult, elderly, child rare. Address, occupation, very important, floor or executive. Because our treatment will be based upon what the patient is doing. Remember, you can give a surgery, but you can't change the profession the patient has. Your surgery and the treatment should be absolutely coordinated with what the patient wants to achieve. There should be the aim and goal, they should match together. Going to that, presentation will be a person able to walk or not able to walk on that limb, the side, and the pre-injury status. Whether he had a significant trauma or not. After the trauma, was he able to walk for some time, as he explained in the impacted cases? And what kind of treatment was he given after surgery? Was he put on the bed? Was traction given? Or any other thing which was done? Did the surgeon who took care of him initially put him non-weight bearing or partial weight bearing? And if non-weight bearing, for how much period was it kept non-weight bearing? This question should ask. If a person has undergone surgery for the initial fracture, when was the suture removed? Was there any discharge? Any history of fever? How was the nature of pain before surgery, after surgery? Describe the pain. Tell the level of activities patient had and how this pain was getting relieved. Whether on presentation in non-traumatic or after the healing status is there or in a late presentation, whether the patient has a limp, painful or painless, and what is the current status that you should tell. So start from pre-surgery, post-surgery, then your presentation, current status. The trauma has to be clearly mentioned because majority of the fractures are post-traumatic. We need to do the constitutional symptoms, more so if we have an intervention of surgical intervention, and the pain before the trauma, which can possibly indicate this is a pathological situation we are dealing with. History of multiple joint pains, history of any hip affection in childhood, any long-term medications, blood transfusion, any alcohol intake or personal history, family history of COX. Many of these features will help delineate, are we dealing with avascular necrosis, an important case of hip joint. General examination mentioned about the build. Tell how to examine the walking patient, the sitting, the standing patient and sitting on chair, the ground, squatting, cross-legged, supine examination, lateral examination, prone examination, do in this sequence. Talk about the gait. The antalgic, short limb, Tenenberg gaits are the three gaits that we should always speak about. Remember, see the classical two things before you see this video. I am again reinforcing. One, video number 1 by Professor Anil Dhal, where he had delineated a classical hip examination case. 2, video number 2, where Professor Sudhir Kumar had clinical presentation of a case by a resident in front of him of a hip. You will be able to understand this video. This video should not be the first video that you should see in the app. First see by Dr. Dhal, then Dr. Kumar, and then this, so that you have a linear relationship of what these slides are. Then talk about the standing. This is the slides taken from Professor Dhal's PowerPoint. Do it in the standing position after the gait. You are evaluating the anterior superior spines. You are having a look at the Tenenberg signs when the patient is standing. But mind you, we talk about this sign in the last stage when we talk about the special test. Remember how sir explained in the Tenenberg sign, we look at the gluteal fold drop, and your eyes should be at the level of the gluteal folds as clearly seen in this photograph. Remember sitting in chair, squatting cross-legged, because this will tell you about the functional assessment. And as Sir has told you in the beginning, if the patient has floor activities, all these are so important. Then in the supine position, let the patient lie down comfortably. Tell the attitude of the patient. Talk about the orientation of the limb, anterior spine, the patella, the medial malleus, level and alignment. Talk about the swelling. In the inguinal region, the Scarpa's triangle. And when you go on the lateral side, the trochanteric region and the gluteal region. When we go further, this is about the supine examination. You can tell about that there is a shortening on the right lower limb with an amount of rotation, external rotation. Then tell about the scars, whether it's a healing by the primary or the secondary intention. The primary healing example is a sutured wound, secondary is slow healing by the natural granulation tissue. There is something called as a third intention, which is a delayed primary closure, where sometimes you leave it open and close it late. That has been given on healing with the third intention. So primary healing or secondary healing are the usual things that people ask. Tell about the sinuses and discharges, the nature, describe in detail, erythema, and if yes, the surgery has been there, is there a gaping, or you can see the implants in this case. Document about the wasting, and talk about the lumbar lordosis in this case. So in lying down, talk about the lumbar lordosis, the anterior spine, swelling, scars and sinuses, thigh wasting, patella and medial malleus. So if you have gone through Professor Dhal's talk, you will remember this slide. This is from his slide. Then the palpation, talk about the temperature, finding of infection are confirmed, tenderness, talk about the anterior and posterior joint lines, confirmation of anterior spine, the patella and the medial malleus level. Trochanter is so important, and when we are dealing with non-unions of fracture neck femur, one of the classical differential diagnosis is an intertrochanteric fracture, where malunion can occur, or its non-union can occur, which is extremely rare. Less than 2% of intertrochanteric fractures can undergo non-union. 98% they have other complications. Level of trochanter, always we are talking about comparison from the other side. Superficial tenderness, deep trochanteric tenderness, thickening, irregularity, and the transmitted movements. Do talk about the scars, the dimensions, tenderness or warmth of that area, the scars are adherent or not, and if adherent, what level, and any implant palpable. We do assess the adductor spasm which is there. There's a test called as Gowin's test, in which you do abduction, externalization of the limb, and if the lower abdominal muscles undergo spasm, it means that is there. Talk about the iliac crest. Look at that area, because many a times in case of non-union, there's a previous grafting, which we can see a surgical scar there. Femoral pulses, distal pulses, lymph nodes. That is very important. Do talk about the deformity and the movements. Talk about the flexion deformities. Thomas test can be done for it. And talk whether the further movement is not there or not. It is painless, terminally painful, painful throughout, or is there a bony end to the same. Examiner wants to listen about the range of movement. Talk about if the flexion deformity, obviously extension will not be there. Talk about the abduction or adduction deformity if there is there. Do talk about the angles. Do talk about the Perkins method and the Cotard's method, as we have discussed clinically in the videos of the hip examination. Do talk about the rotations. Do talk about internal acceleration in the movements of the hip of flexion extension. Talk about the obligatory acceleration sometimes on, and talk about the axis deviation which can be occurring on flexion of the hip. The knee can go towards the axilla. Classically, it goes towards the midline or the mid clavicular line. Talk about the Dassault sign. Normally, when you rotate the limb and you see the trochanter rotation, because the trochanter, the neck of femur and the head, they work as a unit. They have a long arc of circle of the trochanteric movement. But if there's a non-union at the neck femur, the trochanter will have a short arc of circle. This is the Dassault sign. And yes, your examination of non-union neck femur will never be complete till the time you see about the excursion, the telescopy test. So talk about the flexion, extension, axis deviation, abduction, adduction, internal rotation, external rotation, abnormal mobility, that is telescopy, and the Dassault sign. Any long case of hip, talk about the apparent length and true length, talk about the supratrochanteric shortening, and in supratrochanteric shortening, one of the classical area which you can measure is the Brand's triangle. So in the supine position, we'll be able to do the Brand's triangle, and the extension of the base of the Brand's triangle, the The continuation of the long axis of femur is so important to tell you about the supratrochanteric shortening. And why are we drawing this Bryant triangle? Because the last palpable bony landmark that you have over the upper end of femur is the trochanter tip. You can't palpate the head and neck. And that is why you need to use the other landmarks to assess this area. Do the Schumacher's line, do the Cheney's line. Then you have the Morris bitrochanteric area. Do an apparent length measurement to be done from the Ziphi sternum going to the medial malleus. Do the true measurement, the segmental measurement, done from the anterior suprapubic spine to the medial joint line of the knee joint and then the tibial length. Remember how to mark the greater trochanter, how to mark the anterior suprapubic spine. These are very, very important. Do an assessment of any special test where an SLR test can be done, which also tells you an intact axis, and then a specific Trendelenburg test and telescopy test to be done. Lying down on the lateral position will give you two things which are important. The Nellton's line, two prerequisites: patient should be able to lie down laterally and 90-degree flexion should be present at the hip. So a line joining the anterior suprapubic spine to the ischial tuberosity should pass to the tip of trochanter, and per rectal examination do mention about this word, but is rarely indicated in orthopedics. In lying down prone, gluteal muscle wasting and any abnormal bony mass which moves on the rotation of the thigh, indicating a neglected posterior dislocation, can be spoken about, apart from the scars and sinuses. When we talk about one hip, talk about the compare the other side, talk about the ipsilateral joints, the knee joint, the ankle, ideally both the limbs, the sacroiliac joints, the lower spine, the entire spine, and do mention about all these things in the summary, whether we are dealing with a post-traumatic or post-pathological, as you said, non-union of intracapsular neck femur with a duration, with a flexion deformity, with an abduction erection deformity, with true supratrochanteric measurement of in a 60-year-old male with current disability of this.
Yeah, when you are finally bringing out your diagnosis, and you are saying first diagnosis as a non-union of fracture neck of femur, and it is most likely a intracapsular neck of femur. So you, in those situations, you do not get the deformities. Normally you don't get a fixed deformities in fracture neck of femur. Of course, if you get some deformities, then you have to have a differential diagnosis. Go along with it.
Right. Yeah. And then coming to the frequently asked questions in the Viva. The patient presentation, as Sir said, will usually not have the deformities, but every candidate who presents a hip case should be able to include the age, the sex, the duration, a clinical diagnosis with the deformities, with the shortening, and the level of activity that a patient can perform. First question, why is it neck femur? Age, as Sir said, two groups. Tenderness over the mid-inguinal point. Dissolved sign, telescopy sign. Trendelenburg test positive. And the last line, shortening and externodation. If you look at the orthopedic books, this photograph is so classical. Neck femur will have mild shortening, mild externodation. Intertrochanteric will have marked shortening, complete externodation. Classical teaching is if the lateral word of the foot touches the bed, that's intertrochanteric. In neck femur, there's usually about 45 degrees of externodation because the capsule catches onto the distal fragment. But in extracapsular or intertrochanteric, there's a complete rotation, but then there can be a cervicotrochanteric mid variety which can have a mid presentation. But classically, the amount of rotation can tell you. So if you have to diagnose a hip fracture, look at the foot. It can help you diagnose. Mild shortening, neck femur. Marked shortening, intertrochanteric. So we can remember it like this: extracapsular, everything extra. So extra rotation, extra shortening, extra pain, extra shortening, and extra swelling. Because in intracapsular, the capsule will mainly contain the hematoma, and the local signs will not be there. and an extra bone, the irregularity and thickening of the bones.
Yeah, we say extras. And if it is an acute presentation, then you'll have ecchymosis.
Right.
So all E's.
Right. And then mid-inguinal point, when you take it out, a little lateral and distal to it is the anterior joint line, and the posterior joint line is palpable between the greater trochanter and the ischial tuberosity midpoint to it. And the bitrochanteric tenderness can be also done for the hip joint. So you should be knowing how to palpate it, and the mid-inguinal or the tenderness at the base of the Scarpa's triangle, as they call it, is indicative of neck femur. The trochanteric tenderness goes towards the trochanter with an irregularity more so, because you can have a trochanteric tenderness also in the neck femur because they are very close. And the telescopy is classical of non-union neck femur.
Yeah.
And why is it not non-union intertrochanteric? Because in intertrochanteric there should be an irregularity and tenderness over the trochanter.
Absolutely.
So this is an example of intertrochanteric area, and that's the reason why it will have an irregularity, because it's the trochanter between the intertrochanteric area, the greater and the lesser trochanter, the line joining the same. Why is it not an anterior dislocation? Because in an anterior dislocation there is an extension deformity with lengthening, because the only known case of true lengthening in a lower limb is an anterior dislocation of hip. And whereas in neck femur there will be shortening, also there might be a head palpable more in the anterior femoral area.
Yeah, right in the, maybe in the Scarpa's triangle or in the inguinal region.
And this is a very rare case. Most of the hips, they dislocate posteriorly.
Yeah.
So having an anterior dislocation of hip is a very, very rare thing. And why do you think that the head is located in this patient? Means, why do you think that this is not a neglected posterior dislocation or anything else? Because the femoral artery pulsations are palpated against the head of the femur. It's the ground level resistance to this artery pulsation, the head of the femur. And you will be able to palpate them, and they'll be comparable to both the sides in a case of neck femur. Whereas in a dislocation, the femoral artery pulsations will be absent, called as the vascular sign of Narad being positive.
You see, this sign has to be understood very carefully.
Right.
If you have a fracture neck of femur, which is the neck absorption has taken place over a period of time, and the head absolutely becomes semilunar in shape. That means no part of the head is outside the acetabulum.
Acetabulum coverage.
Then you may find that the pulsations cannot be felt
Right.
very well,
Right.
because
They'll be
the
feeble.
resistance
They'll be
is not
feeble.
available of the
Right.
bone.
Right.
So they may behave exactly like Narad sign, may be exactly
Positive.
like a
Dislocation.
like a dislocation.
Right.
But the obvious thing in dislocation is that you are able to feel a globular mass which rotates
With the movement of the
with
thigh.
the movement of the thigh, and you are able to feel that mass in the posterior
Gluteal
part
region.
of the gluteal region.
Right.
So that is most important.
So that's a key point that you should remember, that you should be open to discussion, because the examiner will take your discussion to this level. Can in neck femur, in prolonged neglected cases, vascular sign be positive? Answer is yes. And what will be our differential diagnosis? Coming again to the same point, old ununited fracture intertrochanteric, but we should be able to differentiate. Fracture of head of femur, but then the telescopy might not be so clearly present in this case. Malunited fracture acetabulum with posterior wall fracture. Now this is almost the same presentation, and it's very difficult to differentiate, but there is often, whenever there is a damage to the articular surface of the hip joint, there's often an internal rotation, whereas when there's a fracture, there's an external rotation. It might be a hint that you can have, or old treated TB hip with bony changes of wandering acetabulum. In my country, everything can mimic TB, and TB can mimic anything. It's a classic line that we've been reading since residency. So that is one of the differentials that you should keep in mind. And one question that I feel that everybody will be asked, why it does not unite? Why the neck femur does not unite? It is still called as an unsolved fracture as far as treatment is considered. That's the synonymous name for it. And it does not unite because of mechanical factors, because of biological factors. So there is an angle called as Powell's angle, which is the angle the fracture makes with the horizontal. If it's high, difficult to unite, because a bone unites when there is a more compression. When there is a shearing force, it does not unite. So vertical forces don't allow the healing. The horizontal they allow. So if the fracture is vertical, it won't unite. This is a mechanical force. Then Gardens classified into different types, and he said that if there's a displacement occurring place, it's Gardens 3 and 4, it won't unite. There's a posterior buttress that is required for the neck femur to heal. If it's comminuted, it won't unite. And then if you don't allow to unite, if you accept an inadequate reduction and you don't prove a good fixation, it won't unite. And the number 4 should be avoided in today's world. So these are the fractures which have less presentation as compared to extracapsular, but then complications are more. The nature is balanced. Clinical presentation is quiet, but then the complications are loud. So never accept the last point to happen. And this is what I just spoke about. If the fracture is more horizontal, it's favorable. Powell's grade 1 is an angle at the horizontal up to 30. Powell's grade 2 is 30 to 50. And beyond 50 is Powell's 3, and Powell's 3 has the worst prognosis. Whereas Gardens 1 is what Sir said, a patient might be walking, impacted valgus, impacted fracture. Gardens grade 2 is a complete fracture but absolutely undisplaced. Everything aligned, all the trabeculae aligned. Gardens grade 3, completely malaligned. It's a complete fracture with partially displaced. And Gardens grade 4 is a complete fracture with total displacement, and because the neck goes away, the head and the acetabulum they align. And prognosis wise, people have classified 1 and 2, they have same prognosis, 3 and 4 have same.